We're not live just yet, by the way. YouTube is kicking in here.
Should we move channels?
On. Stay here.
Doesn't matter.
Oh, now I've got the button. Let's go. How's it going, folks? Will Vincent here along with the gang for yet another episode of IndyCar Weekly here on GlacierTV. Now, this actually is going to be the first of two... I'm still too serious. Okay, we're going to do this properly now. Two broadcasts this weekend. We've got today, and we've also got tomorrow as well, when we're going to have a big look at the iRacing.com Pocono 400. Joining me today, we have Dave Judson, the Aussie, James Swinbanks, John Paulsett, Matt Cook, Randy Cosno. Hey guys, how you doing?
Pretty good. Well.
Doing good.
Well, so, of course, we're all in kind of Pocono 400 mode. In exactly 11 minutes' time, the final qualifying session for the iRacing.com Pocono 400 will be taking place. Young O, just a couple of hours ago, setting the fastest 4-lap average time, the only guy to actually go into the sub 41.1 range. Matt, I'm going to talk to you first. You're actually the guy sat in second right now. Talk to you before we come on air. You've done it a 1.26 4-lap average, and you say you can't really go much better.
No, I mean, on average, I might be able to pull like another 100th or two out of it, but I know I can't get below 1.
So come to you as well, James. Hello, how the hell are you doing?
I'm well, how are you?
I'm not too bad. It's that time when I actually only get to see you as World Tour events. You prepared for Pocono? You ready to go?
Not as prepared as I'd like to be, sadly. Real life has done a good job of getting in the way this week.
But you are here anyway. I'm guessing, are you going to try and run both races like you've done previously, or is it just going to be the one race this evening for you?
It'll have to be the one race. And it won't be, it'll be the second race, if anything.
Well, we'll talk a little bit more about Pocono in a little while, because of course, the iRacing.com Eyes on IndyCar series continues to run. This week, the guys on the roadside have been at Sonoma Raceway, think outside the oval. And on the ovals themselves, they've actually been at Kentucky Speedway. We'll talk very briefly about the roadside first, mainly because we didn't talk about them last week. Guys, we can all agree that Sonoma is one tricky bitch of a racetrack.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely one of the hardest road courses as far as I'm concerned.
And the thing about Sonoma as well, Dave, I know that you've raced there quite a bit in the past, is that it's such a momentum track. You can't actually, get your eye off the ball for one moment. And they're straightaways, but they're not even really straightaways, because it's a bit like Chicagoland if you want to compare it to an oval itself, when you're always trying to turning that car.
Yeah, well, momentum's really important, getting through those corners as best you can, because you don't have a lot of straightaway to make up any mistakes that you might make. So it's all about keeping a good rhythm and staying out of the kitty litter.
And overtaking is tough, therefore qualifying is important at Sonoma. And the layout they're running as well, the IRL 2007 layout. Now, you have got a bit of an opportunity to pass at the very top of the racetrack, but still really only about 3 places where you can even try and make an overtaking maneuver. When you consider the race is 52 laps, once you get into traffic, that makes things incredibly interesting, Dave.
Yeah, qualifying probably more than most tracks, very, getting a premium spot, staying up near the front. But if you're a guy running third, fourth, and the leaders run into some slower traffic, they could be second, 2 seconds faster. But if you don't catch them in the right spot, guys behind you can make up a lot of time in a hurry.
And if we have a look at the qualifying results, it's Joshua Chin actually for TNT Racing, who is almost a full second faster than Mark Asher, who's currently second in qualifying, Andres Warner in third, UC Niemanen in fourth, and Paul Stabilo, who rounds out the top 5 in qualifying. 52 laps as well is a very, very long, tough race for these drivers. They're kind of just about within that one pit stop window. They don't have to stop or think about, saving gas the entire way, thankfully. But still, 52 laps at Sonoma, you've got to say, it's one of the toughest challenges, I think, on iRacing this season. Anyone?
Yeah, well, I would agree with that.
Okay, that's roadside done. We're all over, guys. We can't actually really talk much about road. Of course, they have their strength of field race on Saturday. Although that might be a little bit compromised this week, unfortunately, due to the World Tour event. They'll find ways around it. They're all good guys. Say Joshua Chin is leading the way as far as qualifying goes for this week. As far as the season standings go, now that is all about Nico Brand. He is almost 100 points ahead of Dennis Garis in the championship. Andres Warner in third, Yusin Eamon in fourth, and Ivan Basso round out the top 5 in the championship. And we'll go to Oval. We'll talk about scheduling later, shall we? Because scheduling is a fun topic. Because we all need to build bridges and everything. But Oval, Kentucky at night as well, and Kentucky's always one of the more interesting races of the week, Borzuk.
Yeah, Kentucky's is a fun track. It's one of those 1.5 mile tracks, but it doesn't race like the rest of them. It's a little bit flatter than some of the other tracks we see on the schedule. Generally produces a lot of good racing. I know I've seen quite a few of the fixed races this week have been pretty entertaining, and some of the open races have been pretty good as well.
And Matt, we talked at the start of the week actually about the fixed races, and the difficulty is that the cars actually are bottoming out, which means that two-wide racing is possible, but you've got to be very, very careful while picking your line into a corner.
You really do. I mean, if the car ends up settling itself in, which can happen quite easily at the moment, you really have to get off the throttle in order to get it to start moving again, which is obviously going to kill your momentum. In terms of where you can drive, though, I mean, there's a lot of different lines, so two-wide racing is extremely beneficial at the moment.
Matt, what do you think about the guys running the apron in the fixed series at Kentucky?
You're kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't. I mean, that temporary boost that you're getting can be helpful, but when you're making the transition to the apron and then off of it again, you are losing a little bit of time. If that car bottoms out even more, then, that's a considerable amount of time. So it's really a preference on the driver and the situation that you're in.
I haven't seen anybody get any positive gains out of going down there.
It's that sort of thing. Maybe on the last lap, it's possible she's not to come back up. But actually, in racing itself, I mean, of course, if you consider it to real life from the eyes on IndyCar series, you go below that white line, you make a pass, you have to give it back up. Unfortunately, the same rules don't always apply in iRacing. Of course, if you come back up and you cause a wreck, then there's going to be issues. The guys over at first competition body for iRacing, Nim Cross, for example, Shannon Whitmore, they might have a couple of words with you. But that's the thing as well. I mean, fixed racing has been good here at this racetrack. Open, it's been interesting as well, Dave.
Yeah, the open races have been interesting because you get maybe 1-2 guys that really nail that setup, and then the other guys, a lot of them are just running the fixed just because they like running Kentucky and they're trying to get some more laps in. So you get a healthy mix of guys that are on top of their game, and then you got your mid runners running the fixed set, kind of almost two classes almost.
Almost like multi-car racing? How dare you say that?
Nothing wrong with multi-car racing.
No, of course. True story. And actually, we'll have a look at the strength for field race, which took place on Monday. I believe that was Monday. And it's probably not, so I'm just going to ignore everything I've said about that. But we've had some very interesting racing pretty much all week long. And the championship as well. Actually, there's still a little bit left to play with what essentially we have 1 week left at Phoenix. And bearing any minor miracles, it does look as though that out front, our Mr. Man, Randy Crosney, you've got a 42-point lead coming into the final race of the season. And the only person really that can take that away from you is Martin Miller now.
Yeah, and I know he wants to, and he'll give it his best on Monday in Phoenix. I'm looking forward to that race. That'd be fun.
I wouldn't put Jonathan out of it either, actually, at this point, because he definitely could have a drop week in there.
Well,
I mean, Randy, are you worried about John at this point?
Oh yeah. I need to finish and finish well. If John steps up and wins, then yeah, he's going to be, he and Martin, it's going to be really close between the three of us, and you can't count out Matt Lambertson either. I think he's got a drop in there, so if he does really well, and myself or someone else falters a little bit, you could see Matt running right up in there as well. And Matt Cook, I don't think you're totally out of the picture yet either, I might add.
I think Matt Cook's out of the picture.
I'm out of the picture at this point, in my mind.
I think Matt Cook spent too much time doing Pocono practice.
Yeah, to be fair, we'll agree on that one. Of course, a couple of the drivers are taking holiday, sabbatical, shall we say. I know Jonathan Goke is questionable for the race on Monday at Phoenix. And also, it's that time of year as well, where guys have everything goes into play at one point, just as James was actually talking about a little bit earlier on. Still all to play for, however. What Jonathan Goke will need to do is he will need to beat his best previous score, which makes up a top 8. So basically, he needs to beat his 8th fastest points score by 42 points and hope Randy Crosney doesn't improve. He's going to have any chance of winning the championship. Martin Miller simply needs to get 130 points and hope that Randy doesn't improve on a previous drop week. The way it works, of course, you have 12 weeks, you get your best 8 weeks counted, and that will be what determines the championship. And in the fixed series as well, fixed, I think, in my opinion, that's a little bit closer to being completed in some ways, but in other ways, it's incredibly close. Because you've got Goke and Tim Doll, they are separated by 6 points between them. Tim Doll, we know he's good at Phoenix. We know Goke can be good at Phoenix as well. Andre Castro isn't out of the picture yet. He's sat in the 3rd position. He has scored 39 points behind the championship leader, Tim Doyle. But everyone else, you can pretty much say right now, Dave, are completely out of the picture for the season.
Yeah, Doyle, Goke, Castro. Unless there's some incredible amount of bad luck during the final week, I don't see anybody besides the 3 of them contending for the championship. And surprisingly, at Kentucky, Castro did not show up for the strength of field race for whatever reason. So he really gave up a lot of opportunities to gain points on the championship there. So that was pretty surprising on Monday.
Indeed, what we'll do is we'll turn our attention over to Pocono in just a couple of moments' time. I'm going to bring you a little bit of a live update from what is happening in the final qualifying session before the first of the 2 Pocono 400s takes place. This is where it's going to become interesting because it all starts to be spreaded by I-rating and everything, and who knows if a slow guy, sorry, not a slow guy, a low I-rated guy does well. We're never going to know anything. No one's going to beat Youngo though, guys. Do you think that? Anyone going to beat Youngo in qualifying?
I'd say that's pretty locked in at this point. Depending if Martin actually takes a run at it, he might be able to find the speed to be able to do it.
Martin, always a dark horse in qualifying. You can never, ever discount him. But you have to say, though, arguably the greatest guy to run an IndyCar in the last 2-3 years is Youngo. Once again, stepping up. And he was actually a little bit slower in qualifying. A couple of days ago, he was only lying in about 10th, 11th position. But once again, final day comes along, a bump, there he is. And arguably, you could say that he could perhaps go just a tiny bit faster.
Yeah, well, that's par for the course for Young-O. He seems to kind of lay in the weeds there, puts in a time that he knows will get him in, and then once he knows he's safely in, he really, lights up the rockets and usually puts up a pole time.
So, these guys at Pocono, what they have to do is they'll come out of pit road, they will do an out lap, they will then get the green flag, they do 4 timed qualifying laps. And Matt, let's talk about qualifying very quickly, because I've hated it this week, but Pocono, you've got those 2 key points, that entry into turn 1 and that run through turn number 3. Get either of them wrong in any of your 4 laps, pretty much free qualifying away.
Yeah, without a doubt. The entry into turn 1 is really setup dependent. I mean, if your car is extremely loose, you might be able to take a sharper entry. You also have to worry about all the bumps that are there that are going to throw you off. So it's really coming down to a comfortable line that you're consistent at. That's pair along with your setup for turn 1. In turn 3, if you have enough downforce and your car is loose enough, you can take it flat out. But it's kind of a tricky corner. I mean, either way you look at it, if you have to do a lift or if you have to take it flat out, that's going to be an extremely fine line.
Indeed, and there are some setups, some ways of running where it's actually faster to just get off that gas pedal a tiny bit to help settle that car on the inside line, then slam the throttle back on. Drifting up in turn 3, it can cause a world of pain. And also, if you do enter the corner a little bit too hot, you can actually just get out the gas to help the car rotate just a tiny bit, bring it down to that inside line. Arguably, that will lose you less time than if you can try and continue powering around on the outside.
Will, I've got a question for you, actually. I know that there's a lot of talk in the forums this week about the setups and what different people were running. What do you make of the fact that you are more than 2.5 tenths slower than Matt Cook with the same setup?
Because I can't drive.
I think that goes to show who's got, better talent level. Not to say that Will is a lesser talent, but at a tough track like Pocono, you really got to know how to wheel the car for 4 straight laps and putting down the fastest laps you can. So anybody who argues that it's all set up, I think's got their head someplace it shouldn't be.
I mean, arguably there are a number of tracks, places like Texas, we all know, Atlanta, Charlotte. I could roll off a list where, because they're draft lot tracks, it's literally, going to qualifying, put the car into gear, drive around, do 2 laps, hope that you get it, job done. Pocono, the one thing I have found this week is that one setup doesn't fit all. Myself and Matt have actually had a lot of conversations about, little tweaks that I've been making and the pros and cons of making it, because you can't just make one little tweak to a car at a track like this, because, you might get it working better in turn 3, but the rear of the car might be sliding out a little bit more, which will then mean as you go down the straightaway, you're losing about 1 mile an hour. Then you come down into turn 1, you're scrubbing a bit of speed off there. So that's one. I mean, as far as setups go, I've always been on the group, especially at a track like this, one setup doesn't fit all. But importantly, either being able to drive within the setup or being able to tweak a setup to your liking. I think that's where the time is always to be gained or lost. One of the things I think we have seen at this track is that, you have a big separation between some guys in the team. For example, Eric Davis in that 65 car, he's been struggling just a little bit. In fact, I'm having a look at him now. He's going a little bit faster. Completed his second lap, a 41.345. Bad first lap for him. James Swinbanks is doing pretty well right now as well. It looks as though he's done a .365 as Davis hits the wall, so he is going to be done for qualifying. Brendan Lichberg for Broken Arrow, though, he's just done a 31.342. So good for Lichberg. What I seem struggling at the moment is actually Team No Breno. Rob Ewing's only able to do 41.463, guys.
I think that goes to show what you were just talking about, is that there is a wide margin of difference between guys running the same setup at this track.
And another example right now, actually, Ryan Norton is done a 31.325, I think. Gary Borkenhagen, I know he's gone fast in this. His last qualifying, a 41.482. And Dave Jinks, a 41.520. And these guys in the same team in just a space of 1 qualifying, they were about half a tenth apart from each other. But James, I'm going to bring you into the conversation once again. You've just done your 4 laps of qualifying. .365, you're faster than me, you rat bastard. But still, I mean, there is that separation there between drivers here, and it all really comes down to how much faith you actually have in that car when you turn it in.
Totally. It seems like it comes down to, well, it's definitely down to consistency. Anything with a 4-lap average, you've got to be able to pull it off for each lap. And that's especially hard around here, I think, just because it is so bumpy and there's that level of unpredictability.
And you said your lap 3 was messed up. What happened?
Took turn 1 too shallow, entered way too early, and that just washed me up the track, and I had to back it off, and then missed the apex at turn 3. Just took a little bit of a wide apex. So that was a slow lap. That was a 0.6, I think.
One of the guys who is a big surprise, though, we're going to come back to you in a moment, James. Budweiser has not qualified for the iRacing.com Pocono 400. That's a bit of a shock, guys.
Yeah, Bud's one of those guys who's really good at these flat tracks. We all know him from Indy. We know how dedicated he is to Indy, and in my experience, there's been a lot of crossover between setups that would work at Indy and also work here. So I was expecting him to be one of the quickest ones around here this week.
And
yeah, he just had. Sorry, I was watching his laps, Will, and on his lap 2, he just had a slight touch with the wall, and that negated the second lap, and unfortunately, that negates the whole 4-lap average.
What do you guys think about the 4-lap qualifying here?
I really like it. Some guys can get lucky and put down 1 lap, but it really takes an extra level of skill and talent to put 4 laps together with a set which is probably, I would say, pretty hard to drive with. You got all the aero trimmed out of it, and you want that thing to go as fast as you possibly can. So just another additional level of complication to see who can get to the top. And the harder it is to get up there, the probably better you feel when you get there.
Well, here's an interesting question. What was the gap between pole and last place for the Indy 500?
About 2 tenths.
Yeah, so look at this, and it's about half a second at the moment
About
for
that.
the 400.
I mean, to go into that in a bit more detail, you have got to say that there are a number of drivers who did run on the iRacing.com Indianapolis 500 who aren't making the journey over to Pennsylvania to Long Pond to Pocono. And therefore, you could argue that there is a bigger competition spread in some ways. And of course, Indy is Indy. People put months of practice into Indy. At the same time, however, from a personal experience, 1-lap qualifying at Pocono, it's a bit of a luck game, especially for those last couple of hundredths because of the way the bumps and everything works. 2-lap qualifying, I would have had no issue with this week. It's that 3rd and 4th lap, and I think it's not just necessarily the car, but it's that human emotion as well. When you see 2 good lap times on the board, and then you start to relax just that tiny bit into that 3rd lap, and then you tense up into the 4th lap. Now, I think that, things get a lot more difficult. I'm going to give you the example, actually, of Kerry Bettenhausen from his last qualifying run. 4 laps, 41.289 for lap 1, 41.366 for lap 2, 41.394 for lap 4. His 3rd lap, a 41.618. That cost him 2 tenths of a second overall in his qualifying run. And I think that just hits a nail on the head of what you were saying earlier, Dave. Mess up 1 lap and your average is just, falling out the bottom of the floor.
Yeah, and I think it's even harder to keep your momentum going at Pocono with it being so bumpy, and you got 3 different turns, and like James was saying, he missed turning in to turn 1 just a little bit. That screwed up his entire lap. You can argue that if you mess up Indy, you might not get hurt as bad depending on what corner. I mean, I'm not an expert, but I think it was a lot harder to try to put down 4 laps at Pocono than it was putting 4 laps down at Indy.
I think
that being said, if you look at the results, which are final now, I believe,
they are.
Yeah.
I mean, look at the top of the leaderboard. You've got Young, you got Matt Cook, Martin Miller, you got Fast Randy C. If this was just 1 lap qualifying, don't you think that it would be roughly equivalent?
Yeah. I mean, so you're almost saying that, John, that in some ways the extra 3 laps are not important because it'll be the same people coming to the top no matter what side of qualifying you do?
It almost seems that way. It's just I'm just looking at the running order for the first time here, and noticing that it's pretty much the same cast of characters that you'd expect to see at one of the high strength of field races during the regular season.
I think you make a good point, but it just, I guess you could go either way, but it's fun to see something that's a little more realistic, having a couple laps average together.
I think at the same time, what you have done is you have made people have to put more effort into it, and of course, you spend the time just doing laps in qualifying over and over and over and again. Of course, what you're doing is you're clocking more and more miles at the racetrack, which means that when you make that transition from qualifying to race setup, you kind of know the track a lot better. You know how to find a consistent line rather than a line to do one incredibly fast lap. So I think in some ways, what this might have done is helped the drivers understand, the consistency of line over a longer run. But of course, we've got a big difference now from running 4 laps flat out in some cases to running 160 laps, having to lift probably in turn 1, more likely in turn 3, running in the draft, having to deal with cars that get looser and tighten up over the course of a run, and also, probably, I'm going to have to say, the hardest place to pit in all of oval racing.
So what do you think about the 4-lap qualifying procedure if it was to be carried over into the regular season? I know that's one of the ideas that's also been floating around for next season, is changing our overall qualifying procedure to be 4 laps at every track. What do you think about that?
Well, to give you the background, of course, I think it was 2.5, 3 years that IndyCar ran 4-lap average qualifying. So as far as I'm concerned, and I love realism, then I like that. They stopped running it at Iowa in 2010 for 2 main reasons. A, it was taking too long, and B, it was costing them too much money. But I think, having some form of average qualifying, it's been in USAC car, IndyCar blood for a long time now, and I think it's something that should be replicated. Whether it's just the easy option and doing 4-lap average qualifying, or pushing for the attempt to get 2-lap average, I think it will make an interesting change, and also I think it will take away the ability for someone to just do one incredibly fast lap and then struggle in race pace, because the more laps you have to do together, arguably, the more consistent you're going to be in a race run.
I think, too, a 4-lap average helps take away some of the little tricks you might throw at a 1-lap setup that you could say it could equalize some, but the best guys are always going to be at the top. But it just adds another level of, what I'm trying to say. You got to have some skill to run 4 laps and be consistent and have a good average. I think anything that adds more challenge to the series is a good thing.
Now, Dave, this is the easiest car to run in iRacing. Don't ever forget that.
Oh, yes, I forgot about that. I'm sure a wise man once said that.
True story.
Not really.
Controversy! You talked about next season, however, John. We have got the schedules out for next season. For those of you who don't bother to run iRacing, what the hell is wrong with you? Head over to iRacing.com right now. You can get yourself half price off your first 3 months membership just by going to iRacing.com. There's my Tim Terry plug for the day. But schedules are out. We run on 12-week schedules with a week's gap in between. Oh, we love week 13. But next season, really, you have to say, it's one of the better seasons we've had in a very long time. Kansas is probably the only curveball, but I think give it time, and I think that some drivers will try and find a way to make that track work.
I think the general consensus among the community is that it's one of the best schedules we've ever seen for this car, or at least one of the best schedules we've seen in the last. It's got to be 5 or 6 seasons. It's some people might look at the absence of tracks like Atlanta or Charlotte or Texas and be somewhat sad, because it is a unique form of racing in this car. But I think generally speaking, we're really set up to have a good battle between drivers over the next season.
Yeah, just speaking for myself, I'm really excited about this schedule. Bram and Tim Doyle did a really good job putting together a nice schedule for the season. And a good variety of IndyCar tracks that are raceable, and they're not, just line them up and then whoever's on the pole wins a race. So I'm really excited about that. And you got some, good races, good mix day and night. I don't see any negatives.
We have 3 night races in a row. There's a negative.
Well, it's so hot during the summer. It's probably better off to run at night anyway.
I know. We'll run through the schedule. We start off at Homestead Miami Speedway. Then week 2, Phoenix. Week 3, Michigan. Week 4, of course, it's Indy. Richmond, Kentucky, Iowa, Milwaukee, Motegi, Pocono, Kansas, and Loudon. They are your 12 weeks. I'll draw upon the point that you were saying there, John. We've got 3 mile-and-a-halfers. And we've got Kansas, a new track. Then we have Kentucky, which, as you said earlier, doesn't drive like a mile-and-a-half. And then Homestead, which arguably has always been the best mile-and-a-half track going. So there is no Charlotte, there is no Atlanta, there is no Texas. And it's a very big departure in that way, for the way the schedule's been running. And my question to you really is, now the fact that we have got, more tracks to run at, and Montana is on its way, it could soon appear on the schedule as well. It looks as though that we've finally got enough tracks to run a full, authentic 12-race season without having to use some of the tracks, which you call it unique style of racing. I remember when it wasn't as bad, but it really is, hug the low line and see how far you can go.
Well, Will, I know you've got to be somewhat sad about the fact that Talladega's not on the schedule anymore. I know you really
I'm in
enjoyed that
pieces.
track.
I'm in pieces.
But I think the thing I want to say about the schedule is that for the last several seasons, a lot of people have had various reasons for sitting out. I know I've had some qualms about the start times. I personally don't like the Texas-style tracks. I think that with the schedule we got for the next season, it's taken away a lot of any legitimate reasons people might have had not to be running this car and not to be running the strength of field races. So I really hope that in the upcoming season we see the car counts increase dramatically from where they've been the last couple of seasons.
On the flip side of that, however, this is by far the toughest season we've had. I don't think I remember a time when you've had New Hampshire, Pocono, Motegi, Milwaukee, Richmond, and Phoenix all on one schedule. Without thinking, there's at least 6 what I'm going to call tougher tracks, because you're going to have to lift. Oh my god. But you can't run a full 8-week season without doing at least 2 of those tough tracks. And for me, in one hand, that might hurt participation for the very simple arrive and drive thing. But when you think about it, the people that we're trying to get arrive and drives from are the NASCAR people. And what do? They lift pretty much every track they go to. So it's a tougher season. I think what's going to happen this season is you're going to see a new layer of drivers come to the top because of the fact that you have got to really race a lot more, because there's so many different styles of racing. And the important thing as well, we're back to 2-hour races, guys. Finally.
Yeah, that's another exciting point about this season schedule is every 2 hours instead of every 4. So there's a lot more opportunities to race, which also may draw a bigger crowd because, it used to be, I missed the 9:45 race. I got to go to bed. I can't wait up another 4 hours to run a race. So looking forward to that as well.
And not only that, of course, it's the road season's also back to over 2 hours as well. Now, we'll have a look at the road schedule. Start in Mid-Ohio, then to Road America, TI-80 at Okayama, then Sonoma, Watkins Glen, Interlagos, Laguna Seca, Spa-Francorchamps, Phillip Island, Indianapolis, Sebring, and finishing at brand new track, Montreal. Look at the Gilles Villeneuve.
Awesome.
I know, I'm so looking forward to that track.
Schedule.
It's amazing. And the thing is, what they've done as well is, the one thing that I think that was confusing for those guys last season is they had the longest lap count of any series in iRacing, running for about an hour 30, hour 40 minutes in some cases. They've dropped that lap count down a little bit, which I think, in my opinion, makes it more manageable, because of the fact that, the Road Series has suffered quite a lot of participation. And now they've got a schedule where you're still going to have to pit, so you still have that strategy, but you don't have to worry about just fuel saving or having to race for an hour and a half almost in the car. And again, every 2 hours on the roadside, qualifying at 30 past the hour. So I think these guys have got the best season they've ever had as well, James.
Absolutely, it's certainly looking that way. And there's another variable as well, which we haven't spoken about, which is going to be whatever changes are made to the next build, including, I'm very much looking forward to what's hopefully going to be a tyre update, because I think that's a big part of, combined with the 4-hour schedules and the ultra long races, which frankly were quite a commitment. I think that was combined quite a big killer for the roadside, but I think also losing the fixed series as well leaves just the one option, the open series, which hopefully encourages guys to jump in the garage and learn how to use get in there and get their hands dirty on the car and figure out what does what, and should hopefully be a good season. I'm looking forward to coming back and racing again.
That's the difference next season as well. There are no more fixed series on the roadside. There do still a fixed series on the ovals, however. I don't think that's a big issue on the roadside, because I always like to think about the way that you feed up in iRacing. Because of the way the license structure works, I think that the way that you progress your career in iRacing should be the same as well. So, of course, you'll start off in the Mazdas. But then you'd end up in the D-Class going to the open wheelers, obviously Skip Barber Formula 2000. Then to the Star Mazda. Your next progression then, you can split off and either go the Lotus 79 route or the IndyCar route. And then, of course, the top level is the F1 car, which then leads on to the iRacing.com Pro Series and World Championship Series. In many ways, you could argue that losing that fixed series on the roadside on one hand means you've got a very big jump now from Star Mazda to IndyCar. But when you compare it to the oval side, where there isn't that feeder series, I think this change is really going to help Star Mazda, and I think it will help overall just get a smoother transition to IndyCar overall, because you've now just got to learn the car as you go along, rather than just being in this kind of like, I don't know, cotton wool bubble almost of, being surrounded by the ability to just drive a fixer up and never wanting to challenge yourself to do the open races.
Well, the other thing is for the guys who would jump straight from the Star Mazda series into the IndyCar Road series, there's a bit of a different culture with the road guys than there is with the oval guys. I think we're all well aware of that. And you can see that every week there's a lot more openness, willingness to share setups, and I know guys do pretty regular sort of tutorials or road schools or sessions with guys who are learning the ropes. So I think there's already this sort of built-in support system for guys who would like to make that jump. And I think by getting rid of the fixed series, it sort of forces people to take the training wheels off a little bit sooner, but by doing that, they've actually got to learn and get their heads into the open series that much quicker.
You're completely right, and Mr. Randy C does every week a session with Nico Brand, except this week they had Ricciardo Tulu, Ella Atala, Ella Motorpark, whatever you want to call him, and he was doing it in his place. However, when I think about the roadside, I look at the Lotus 79 because they had a very similar issue about 6 months, a year ago now, and the same also to the Radical Series, James. And I know that you do a lot more road racing, you've seen a lot more over there. The Lotus 79 at one point was in dire straits. The Ford GT at one point was in dire straits. The same with the Radicals. And the way in those series, the actual core community members just gather around together and not only help themselves but help new members into the series. I think that a lot of work's been done on that roadside to try and bring people in, and I think, it's very encouraging times now for those road guys.
You kind of wish you could see some of that same level of cohesion among the oval guys, but it is what it is.
Yeah. Someone carry on for a minute.
Well, I was going to ask James a question. It looks like he's stepped out of the booth. I saw that Phillip Island is back on the schedule for the Indy Road Series. I was just wondering if the drop bears were going to be better modeled in this upcoming build.
Did I hear something about drop bears?
Yes, you did.
Sorry, I was just asking. I don't know if you've heard any rumors, but Phillip Island is on the schedule for the IndyCar series this upcoming season. I was just wondering, have they improved the drop bear model?
They have indeed. You want to stick away from, there's what is it, like turn 2 or turn 3, the big long left-hander?
Turn 2.
There's a big drop-off. big drop off on the right hand side. You don't want to go down there.
Well, with that track too, there's so many elevation changes and hills and bumps that if you have a pretty big off, you can get really far off that racetrack and into some pretty deep forest. So I'd be kind of concerned.
Yeah, it's wide open. Like, it's just a big open field. You can get lost pretty easily. If those drop bears find you before you find your way back to the track, it's game over.
Well, it's lucky they wear helmets and fire suits. At least they'll offer some protection, right?
That's true.
Well,
Oh,
maybe.
God. I tell you what, though, Phillip Island, it's... I rode it in the F1 car a couple of seasons back, and it became immediately my favourite road track because it is so fast, and you had to have so much commitment in that car. You talk about turn 2, and you're so right, it's such a fine line through there. If you get the corner perfect, you've got so much speed out of turn 3, through like Kinkin 4, down into that right-hand hairpin on the left-hand as you come up the hill. And the same as well, the last couple of corners on that racetrack, you come over a blind crest left-hander, got to find a way of slamming onto the brakes for a right-hand turn before you come to the last 2 corners, which are going to be close to, probably not exactly flat, but very close to it. And you've got to have so much faith in your car, and I know the guys love racing there. I'm so glad for them to have that back. On the roadside as well, we're going to have Circuit de Gilles Villeneuve, Montreal, and I think it's a track that everyone either knows from F1 or from Nationwide Series coverage. But let's not forget that Champ Car ran there a couple of years, well, about 10 years ago now. And it really is a true driver's track, and it's also a fan favourite as well. And I think all of these guys are going to love racing it.
I cannot wait to race in Montreal. It's one of my favorite tracks ever, flat out. So I'm really looking forward to taking the IndyCar out and throwing it around for a few laps. It's going to be a lot of fun, especially the big long straight, that hairpin, and then the big long straight up the back next to the river, and then the chicane of, or what do they call it? The chicane. Then you got the Wall of Champions on the right hand side.
You see, everyone knows what the Wall of Champions is. Of course, you have technically got the tyre barrier of champions at Interlagos as well in turn number 3. For those of you who have no idea what I'm talking about, go and have a look at the race where it was soaking wet. I think it was 2003. James will correct me in a moment. Where it was soaking wet and people just went off at the Curva de Sol, turn 3, and hit the tyre barriers. It's the same race that Giancarlo Fisichella won, and then lost, and then won again. It's also the race where Fernando Alonso decided he wanted to hit a tyre, which could have actually been a lot more serious than it was.
You know, Mark, did Webber have a massive accident first? Or
Yeah,
no, I think it was Alonso had a huge accident first.
It was Webber that was
Webber
first.
just ran into him.
No, it's Webber that was first. Webber coming out of Yonkao, as he came through the kink, he just lost the car. Then Alonso just slammed into, and there was debris all over that racetrack. It was.
Yeah, that was a good race though.
It was.
I'd like to know what Matt Cook thinks about another Canadian track getting added to the schedule.
Go Canada.
Enthusiastic there.
Unfortunately, I'm not really a road guy, although I'd like to get into it a little bit more. So I'd actually have to take a look at Montreal again, since I haven't seen it in about 5 or 6 years.
It's a really good driver's track. It's got a really good flow to it. It's like kind of like Interlagos and Phillip Island for that matter. They all have a really nice kind of natural ebb and flow to them.
And
I'm just wondering if they have the shoe model incorporated for that race.
Danica!
Nah, they better have a Tim Hortons in the pit lane.
Danica Patrick had to come up once in this show.
woohoo, Danica!
Drink?
Yep, everyone drink. We'll talk about real life rides of the IndyCar series in a couple of moments. Before that, we will go back to the oval side because we're starting to get into a discussion about tracks. John, I think that's one of the things actually that, you know, until Kansas came out, it was always you'd have 10 or 11 decent tracks, and you'd have to pick that 12. I mean, if I go back through the annals, we've had Charlotte, Atlanta, Chicagoland, Dover, Dega, which have all been raced at. And it's always been that 12th track which has caused so much animosity between people. On one hand, you have the people that say, we'll race there, it's fun racing. I know a couple of other tracks have been suggested as well, places like Darlington and Rockingham. The US version, not the awesome UK version, we don't have that yet, unfortunately. But now we've got 12 pure IndyCar tracks. We've got Fontana along the way. Is this a changing of the guard now? Is it always going to be a season like this, or will the Talladegas and the Charlottes and the Atlantas and that come back into play?
Well, I'd like to agree with you that this was sort of a change of the guard or sort of a new beginning for the IndyCar series in terms of the schedule. I think what eventually is likely to happen is if you run 2 or 3 seasons back-to-back with essentially the same schedule, that same sort of clamoring for other tracks is probably going to arise. And even if you have, at that point, 13 or so viable IndyCar tracks to race on, it's really hard to build consensus within a community like we have with the IndyCar guys.
Well, we have to put Texas on there for 2 seasons of the year because, of course, it is an active IndyCar track. Chicagoland, I mean, is a track which you could run. It's actually not as bad as it used to be. For some reason, I don't know why, the backstretch actually, the fact that you're always turning, it seems to make things a little bit more enjoyable. I raced there in a league race about 3 months ago. I actually had a load of fun trying to work on the outside line. Just enough banking so that you can do it, but not enough banking that the inside works perfect. The inside line works perfectly. You've got Vegas, of course. I know a number of people still have issues about going to race at Vegas in that car. And then you go to tracks which weren't raced as regularly or as frequently. You have still got Dover, an IndyCar track. You still have Charlotte, which was run in IndyCar. Of course, they stopped running there after a huge accident in '99. Then you still have Atlanta, which is a track which was run until, I think, about 2004. So you still have those 1.5 mile tracks. With Fontana coming in, as I say, though, you've got, I think it will end up being about 15 tracks to work from. But, I mean, in some ways, with big thing what we're still looking for is the DW12, because I think you get the DW12, all of a sudden, you can go back to trying out these places. Because a lot of, the situation that we're in now is tried and testedness. I'm going to say it again, tried and testedness. You've got Charlotte, we tried it, it doesn't work. You're never going back there because they have the world record in qualifying. You have Atlanta, we've tried it, it doesn't work. You can pretty much run the apron, don't do it. You have Chicagoland, it doesn't really work, don't go there. You have, where have I missed out? I don't know, Dover. We tried it, it doesn't really work, don't go there. You have Talladega. Talladega seems more fun, but it was always the sort of thing where you just need to be on the outside line coming out of turn 4 in the final lap, and you've got pretty much a 50-50 chance of winning the race. Alternatively, you could just run out of fuel twice and therefore find a new strategy to win the race.
Well, I want to know what you've got against Darlington. You're a big, motorsports history buff. You got to know that track was originally designed for open wheel cars.
Yeah, but it's not running open wheel cars. And I think the way it is that, if you could find a way of running that car on more the apron part, because, there's still quite a bit of banking down there, then it'll be fine. I don't know, I've tried it before. It pretty much is flat out. The groove is so narrow there, and all I can see is people just diving down onto what essentially is the apron, and then coming back up in it. And the transition from the flatter part to the fully banked part, I think it will just be a catastrophe.
I'll be honest, I threw that out there because I want to see the Fix Series racing at that track.
From pure driving value or pure comedic value?
Driving, of course. I mean, it would be great to see Matt Cook leading all that chaos.
It'll be one of those tracks where you need to get out front, get a very good restart, pull away, and then watch the trouble go on behind you, I think. And I think that's one of the differences as well, actually. And I think I alluded to this recently this week, where tracks like Dover, for example, I remember the first time we ran Dover in the ISOWC. It was a great race between myself, Ryan Norton, Dave Jenks, and a couple of others. But that was because you could only have about 3-4 hours to build a setup for that track. You have a week to make a setup for that track, and all of a sudden, people find every little bit of speed that is there going. I think that's what makes these tracks more difficult. There are some tracks which I think, works better in a league setting compared to an official series setting because of the fact that people generally don't commit as much time to building setups for such events.
Yeah, and I'm going to take over your job, Will, and segue to a new subject. Judson, I know that you're going to be at the actual real-world IndyCar race at Mid-Ohio in a couple weeks. Talk to us about the spread you're going to have there. Are you hosting a barbecue? What's going on?
Yeah, me and me and Eric Vanek and a couple other guys so far are going to be in the campground at the Mid-Ohio track, IndyCar weekend, August 2nd through 4th. We're going to be in the campground right outside the Keyhole, and we're planning on Saturday the 3rd to kind of like after the practices are over, maybe 5, 6 o'clock, to, just kind of have a gathering of some iRacers, share some stories, share several beers, I'm sure, and, bring whatever you want, bring a chair, bring some chicken, whatever. We'll have a good time. I know we've kind of informally met some drivers over the past couple of years, and it's always been a lot of fun. So kind of wanted to do a little more formality just so everybody kind of knows what time it is, and hopefully get a lot of people there and share a lot of good stories and have a good fun.
I think we should do a trackside show. We should do
I
this
think
show live from Mid-Ohio.
What, when he's drunk? That'd be hilarious. I'll tell you what, though.
Well, you do it when you're drunk.
True story. But we've got you've been invited by Mike Kitchell to go and say hello to the guys at Panther, etc. Again. I was just thinking, he was saying earlier on today that one of the things that he really wanted me to do was to sing Back Home Again in Indiana. I was just wondering whether or not we should actually call him on this show and try and do that for the fun of it.
Do it.
Do it.
You got to do it.
Well, I've got his office number and his on-site number. I'm wondering if I call his on-site number, whether I can actually get through to him.
There's only one way to find out, right?
Yeah, we'll do that in a moment, shall we? But we're going to Mid-Ohio soon, of course. But before that, we have the double header at Toronto in the Eyes on IndyCar series. If you really want some lulls, or standing starts.
Yeah, that's really gonna throw things out of whack for some of these guys. That'll be really entertaining to watch. How many people do you think are gonna stall on the start?
4. And the issue is, I've actually had a look at the rules for this, because what happens are, like F1, they'll do a pace lap. They'll line up on their grid position, and then they will show 2 sets of red lights, and then the lights will go green. This will really confuse Lee Diffie. However, if any car stalls on the grid, then they wave off the standing start, and they go to a rolling start. What's the point? Just do it again. And again, and again. It'll be more fun for TV. But essentially, all it will take is, to bring Milkaduno. I mean, Paul Tracy's coming back, for Christ's sake. I mean, he can't start a car to save his life anyway. All it takes is for him to stall, and we're back to rolling start. I think that IndyCar in this situation needed to be a little bit more committed to what they were doing, rather than just saying, okay, if it doesn't work the first time, we'll just go straight to a rolling start.
Playing devil's advocate, if I don't want to do a standing start, I just make sure my car don't start, and then I don't have to worry about it.
Well, and I don't know if you guys seen who's taking over race control for this weekend.
Bernard. Oh, but the paddock loves him. According to what I've read.
I'm sensing a little bit of animosity there, Dave.
Well, when you start an oval race when it's raining, kind of got to question the guy's judgment.
That was still funny. I mean, mainly because you get to see Danica spin.
Well, and, hey, you know what? Maybe we'll get another chance for some more double birds.
Yeah, because the bird is the word. You know that, right?
Bird is the word. Haven't you heard?
I haven't heard. Did you know that bird is the word, John?
So, Will, what do you think about the NASCAR series at New Hampshire this weekend?
Anyway, moving on. But Toronto itself, it's an airport track. IndyCar came with a lot of stick in the last couple of years. We're going to a lot of airport tracks, and they kind of slimmed that down a bit. Now only one race in Canada. However, that track at Toronto, they did some work on it back in 2011, and they've really actually kind of made that into a fun track to race at. Of course, the most fun place to run at is, and I've just been told Toronto's not an airport. What am I talking about? I'm just going to hit myself around the head.
I don't really know.
That was Edmonton.
Yeah, that was Edmonton they run, which is an airport track. But Toronto, they run it at a street course, like all good street courses are. And, IndyCar, they do run at a lot of street courses, and they do it pretty well, you have to say.
With the new car, the street courses have been fantastic.
Yeah, when there's not a set of railroad tracks to jump, usually the street courses are pretty entertaining.
And when you think about it as well, the 2 races, the double headers we saw last time, I mean, I think everyone was surprised about Conway being able to go to Victory Road in that first race. and then wasn't it the Frenchie who came home first in the second race, Pagenaud? And the amount of winners we've had this season really has been astonishing to watch. I think we're going to bring another Canadian now. Hey, we're talking about a Canadian racetrack. Hi, Eric. You're Canadian. How are you?
I'm good.
There we are. That's what we wanted to say to you. But the amount of winners we've had so far in this year's Iceland IndyCar Series, of course, with Dixon somehow being able to get a Ganassi to Victory Road once again this year. It really does mean that we're into the second half of the season now, Dave, but we still have no idea who's actually going to win this championship. It could be Mr. I promise I'll pay my taxes at some point, Elio Castroneves himself. It could be Ryan Hunter-Reay. Takuma Sato might figure out that, you can't win a championship without running into the rear of someone on pit road, going 40 miles an hour faster than anyone else. Or, you could have one of those other guys. I mean, Marco could win the championship, for Christ's sake.
Yeah, it's right now. There's no consistent guy right now. Very up and down season. If somebody can take this season by the throat, let's say, and run off a string of really good finishes and pull out a big gap, the way everybody's been inconsistent so far this season, I don't see anybody catching up. Marco probably should be in a points lead with a pretty big lead, but his fuel guy can't get the rig out. The left front tire changer can't change the tire right. Everything seems to break on the car. He's got classic Andretti luck. And Ryan Hunter-Reay, the poor guy, gets run over by, you can't even logically explain why Sato ran over the back of his car. Obviously, it was a mistake, but that's pretty big, especially for a professional.
I think we're going to see that in the Pocono 400, either the race tonight or the one tomorrow. I think somebody's going to do the same exact thing in the iRacing version.
Yeah, especially because the cones, compared to the real-life counterpart, are a lot farther away from the pit road. So you got to slow up a lot quicker, and in some cases, guys will still be in the corner slowing down for pits. So that'll really be interesting to see what happens.
You also, have a season. We've only got one oval left to go. Of course, the Marcos of the world, the Frankittis of the world have always been stronger there. There's been one guy that we haven't actually talked about really all season is doing much of himself, mainly because he sucks, but that's been Will Power. He has still got the chance. If he kicks that car into high gear and wins every single race from now on in on the road courses, he's still got a chance of actually finding a way back into the championship.
Yeah, he does, but he hasn't shown anything to be able to prove to me right now that he's going to go win, 4 or 5 straight road course races. Now, obviously, I think he's the most talented road course driver in the IndyCar series right now, and he's definitely capable of doing that. But a lot of the smaller teams right now have been showing that they've been outrunning the Penske's and Ganassi teams, and it just seems like that's going to continue.
And there's people like Newgarden, who seems like they finally turned the corner. Hinch, once again, looks as though he's very good at the start of the season, struggles in the second half of it. I'm actually looking forward to seeing Newgarden win a race, mainly because I'm wondering whether or not his adopted mum will start crying. Of course, by adopted mum, I mean Sarah Fisher, because she pretty much is now old enough to be his mother. But for who's going to win at Toronto? Are we actually going to have someone win another race? Someone like Hinch winning another race? Will it be Ryan Hunter-Reay winning a race? Or can someone surprise... can Paul Tracy win the race, for Christ's sake?
Danica?
Yeah, because Danica's going to go all the way from Loudon to run in an IndyCar race.
I had to.
Tell you what, I'd love to see Will Power finally win something. It's been a while since he's won a race.
It's because he's been a
over a
while
year,
since
I
he's had
believe.
some talent.
Well, it's been a while since he's been run into the last time I checked.
Oh, fighting words there from the Aussie. Anyone? Give me an answer.
Yeah, the IndyCar season's been so up and down, left, right, forward, backwards. It's hard for me to even pick anybody who's going to win one of these two.
One of the things as well, because we really are degenerating into random conversation now. Pocono, they were saying they're going to run want to run 500 miles next year. The only reason why they didn't is because ABC, what a surprise, only gave them 3 hours to run the race, and it's like, okay, we can only do 400 miles in that case, even though the race only took 2 hours to run in the final place. Will that extra 100 miles help IndyCar add validity to the Triple Crown? Because this year, unfortunately, with only 2 cautions, it did become a fuel race very, very, very quickly. And as soon as Marco came onto pit road after doing 30 laps, I was thinking, no way he's going to make it.
I don't know. I mean, I get the impulse to add miles and add validity to the crown maybe, but just as a sort of casual viewer of that, I didn't think it needed another 100 miles. I don't think another 100 miles would have done that race any good. I think at this point, where the IndyCar series is going to have the most success is by differentiating itself from the NASCAR series, which it's obviously competing with head-to-head on certain weekends. And I don't think making the races longer and more drawn out is the good thing to do. I think there's actually some benefit to having these races a little bit quicker, a little bit faster, a little bit more speed, and a little bit more, pure strategy and stuff going on, rather than just adding miles onto these races.
And schedule-wise as well, Pocono's got a 3-year contract. Robin Miller, and everything that Robin Miller says, of course, has to be factual. Says there's about 30,000 people on the stands, which isn't bad. And you have to say that, actually, whilst the race was going on itself, there was a good number of people in the stands. The one thing that got me, the second the race finished, they all disappeared. But you've got Pocono in a 3-year contract. You've got rumours about the Glen coming back, rumours about Phoenix coming back, rumours about Michigan coming back. If you could pick 2 tracks to bring back to the IndyCar schedule, what would it be? I'm going to start with you first, David Judson.
Watkins Glen and Michigan would be my 2 choices.
Eric?
I don't know. I haven't given much thought. Watkins Glen would be neat. I haven't seen a race there in a long time. And Edmonton.
Canadian with a Canada track. James, we're going to say Surfers Paradise. I know that. So what's your other track?
Yeah, I've actually walked the Indy track at Surfers. It would have been pretty awesome to see them there, I have to admit. But I don't know. I think IndyCar needs to go back to some of the great American road courses, like Road America or Watkins Glen for sure. I'd like to see them run at Michigan again too. That'd be really good.
I'm changing my answer. I'm getting rid of Watkins Glen and bringing back Cleveland because it's 20 minutes from my house, so I'm going to be a homer.
Good boy. John, what's yours?
The road course at Thompson? No, just kidding. Michigan definitely would be great, and Road America would be really fun with those cars.
Matt?
I'd have to agree with John. Michigan, Road America.
Cosmo?
I like all the suggestions so far, but again, from a selfish standpoint, I'd love to see Laguna come back because it's in Central California on the coast. It's absolutely gorgeous there.
Well, you've got Elkhart Lake Road America. It's one of those tracks that they have been talking about. In fact, I believe actually that the way it's going on at the moment is that they're waiting for word on what's going to happen in Milwaukee before they go over to Road America. Of course, being both from Wisconsin, a very close market there. I think they're worried about having too much saturation in the market, which will hurt both races. I think everyone wants to carry on seeing Milwaukee, oldest operating racetrack in the world, blah, blah, blah. Always produces some interesting racing as well. I'd love to actually be able to find a way to have both those races going on. I think actually IndyCar's growth is actually in that kind of Midwest area at the moment as well. So I think they need to have some form of focus on there, really establish it as its home once again. Got Fort Lauderdale as well, which has been mentioned before. Don't really give 2 hoots about that. I'd love to see Surface come back. I can understand the reason why they left Motegi because of the flight costs and everything else over that. It's such a shame. I'd love to actually see them go back to Motegi if they ever repave the oval. I don't know if they have. Personally, I'd love to see them come back to Rockingham, UK. None of this new North Carolina bullshit. And I'd love to see them go to Lawrence again. Also, I mean, this is the whole thing. I think you could actually do a kind of European mini-series by going to Lawrence, to the Red Bull Ring in Austria. Would be a great track for IndyCar, the old A1 ring. And then also, you've got the options of Brands Hatch, you won't be able to do Silverstone, Brands Hatch at Donington Park, for example, Rockingham, or they could even actually run the old Birmingham Super Prix track as a road course. And then you've got places like Manicourt in France, Paul Ricard in France is that as well. So, and that's one of the things, I mean, unfortunately, UK's coverage has sucked in the last couple of years. I can tell you that because of the fact that it's been on one of the cable channels that you have to pay an extra $60 to get just to be able to watch it. And now it's on ESPN and they don't even show half the races live. But I think that growth in Europe will come at some point soon. I think any open wheel event over there, people like going to. But I think the overriding thing there for Road America, would you have Road America though at the price in Milwaukee?
No. But to summarize your answer to your own question, Will, apparently we're adding every single track you can think of to the schedule. I like it. I like where you're going with that.
Gotta have a NASCAR size schedule.
Yeah, it sounds like we're gonna have a 52-week schedule.
Well, they complained about a 6-month off season. Well, you don't have to worry about that with a 52-week schedule.
Well, at least the real life series gets a combined road and oval. That's nice.
By the way, shall we see if we can get Mike Kitchell so I can sing him a song?
Yes, but
absolutely.
if you do, just tell him I promise I won't dance.
Okay, here we go.
I'm a little concerned about what's happening right
It's ringing.
Oh, okay.
He's making a very expensive international call.
So this has turned into like a prank call show?
No, he clearly did say that he wanted me to sing Back Home Again in Indiana to him.
Oh god, I'm gonna have to put you on mute really quickly here. I hear the phone ringing.
It's ringing and no one's answering. Do I leave a voicemail? What do I do?
I think you should leave a voicemail. You could sing on the voicemail.
Sing the voicemail.
Oh god.
Your call has been forwarded to an automated voice messaging system. 317 65256 is not available.
It's going through
At the
voicemail.
tone, please record your message. When you've finished recording, you may hang up or press 1 for more options.
You ready?
Which is the longest. Yeah, go for it, Will.
Back home again in Indiana.
If you're satisfied with the message,
Oh,
press 1.
it
To
stopped!
listen to your message, press 2.
What?
To erase and re-record, press 3. To continue
Okay.
message erased.
Yeah, here we go. We'll go
At
again.
the tone, please re-record your message. At the end of your message, press 1.
Back home again in Indiana.
We didn't get your message.
We didn't
either
get my
because you
message!
were not speaking or because of a bad connection. To disconnect, press 1. To record.
Oh, productive conversation here. Productive
It's
conversation.
Kitch's voicemail actually didn't want to listen to me sing. What's going on there?
I think that's a smart voicemail
Yeah, I
program.
was gonna say he has a smart device.
Yeah. Mike, if you're listening, I tried. I'm sorry. If you know Mike, tell him to call me back and I'll sing to him another time.
I think you should give out your phone number so he can get in contact with you.
Good point.
He has my phone number. I think actually we're pretty much all done. We've got 6 minutes to fill, guys. What can we talk about in 6 minutes?
The 400, maybe?
400. Who's going to win it?
I think Mr. Martin Miller is going to take home the Saturday race.
Who's going to take tonight's race?
Will Vincent, obviously.
Yeah, right.
Mr. Cook.
Yeah, if Matt's running tonight, he's got a pretty good shot. I've done plenty of testing with Matt this week, the last couple of weeks, and he's really good here. I think Randy might give him a run for the money, although I don't know if Fast Randy C's running tonight or not.
It'd be a game time.
What does that mean?
I think he meant to say game time decision.
Yeah, my mic broke out. Thank you for completing that sentence, Dave.
You're welcome.
Shut up.
So,
Go on.
what do you think the quality of the racing is going to be like in both these races?
Well, I've been actually pretty vocal on what I've been saying about this.
You vocal? No way.
I know, right? In some ways, I think the fact that there is no resets is going to make a huge difference because tap the wall, game over, job done. And I think that caution-wise, we're going to have about 8 cautions. If there was a reset, you'd have about 20 cautions. I think that a lot of guys will be taking it very easy early on. It's Pocono, passing can be tough. You've got to be careful on the tyres, you've got to be careful on momentum. You've got to keep that car in one piece. I think people are going to get scared if we have green flag pit stops. I mean, my personal strategy is start from the back and turn laps and get to about lap 130 and see where I am. But I don't know. It could go either way. It could be a real crash fest, or I think it could be a bit like this year's Indy 500, where there wasn't really many cautions at all. And you have to say, this year, the quality of this year's Indy 500 racing-wise was the best that we've ever seen.
I can tell you that first 100 laps or so under green really took me by surprise in the Indy 500. And you're right, I wouldn't be surprised if the top split saw similar really long green flag runs. Maybe if not in the first 10 or 20 laps, maybe in the middle section of that race.
Hey, John, I got a question for you.
Yes, I've been practicing my pit entries. Thank you very much, Will.
Good. That wasn't actually my question.
What's your question?
With the restart procedure here, I mean, the green flag comes out very quickly as soon as that pace car makes that hard left turn down towards pit road. Is that going to impact the way that the field kind of spreads out or stays, together on that run down to turn 1 on starts and restarts?
I think it impacts the level of strategery, you might say, on the restarts. The leader, at some places can really lag back and then try to bunch everyone up and then get away. But you pretty much know if you're sitting in P2 or P3, you pretty much know what the leader of the race is going to be doing, which in a lot of instances makes for cleaner restarts, I think, because if people are kind of all on board with when the field's going to start getting rolling, you've got less of that accordion effect. Although you never know. You never know what people are going to do with these cars.
Don't forget single file restarts after the initial start. You're going to have a 33 car field. You're going to have a lot of guys back in the corner when the green comes out. That could really throw guys for a loop.
Heck, you can have some guys actually still on that short shoot between turn 2 and turn 3 when the green comes out, which is going to make... I mean, taking turn 3 at a low gear is always incredibly interesting to see. And that whole thing, cautions breed cautions, I think with single file restarts, it's going to make things a little bit better, in my opinion. We've got to have about an hour to talk about Pocono tomorrow. I know, Dave, you're going to be joining me in the booth tomorrow. We have got IndyCar Weekly special tomorrow. We're going to go on air 1 hour before the start time for the inaugural iRacing.com Pocono 400. Presented live, I can say exclusive because we're the only people broadcasting it, and exclusive on GlacierTV. The race itself will get underway at 7 p.m. GMT tomorrow evening. That's 2 o'clock for those of you who live on the East Coast. IndyCar Weekly will be back at 1 o'clock Eastern Time, that's 6 p.m. GMT, for an hour, talking about nothing but Pocono and Danica. So join us there for that. Myself, Will Vincent, will be there for that, as well as Dave Judson and any other rascals that we can bring in. Keep in touch with us on Twitter. Use the hashtag iRacingIndy or GlacierTV. GlacierTV Super Saturday coverage, of course, kicks off with the inaugural episode of the F1 show on GlacierTV before yet another round of the iRacing.com World Championship Grand Prix Series. It's round number 10, and it's at the most famous racetrack of them all. It will be Circuit des Spa-Francorchamps. And, of course, the regular IndyCar Weekly will be back next Friday night. We're actually going to try and get Mike Kitchell on the line so we can actually sing to him, because I think that he's going to feel rather perturbed about the fact he's just got a missed call from someone who has no idea who he is in England. It's probably Dario thinking he can get a drive at Panther next year. In the meanwhile, for myself, Will Vincent, from that guy laughing over there, Dave Judson, Eric Davis, James Winbank, John Paulson, Matt Cook, and Randy Cosno. Bye!
Bye.
Good luck, everyone racing.
Hey, Randy, we are farmers.